Alrighty, team, back with Chris today on Rethink Real Estate, and we're talking about a topic that maybe some of you have had issues with, maybe not, but it's email. It's being flagged. Okay, we've currently had a situation where we've had to get multiple domains and multiple email addresses in order to make sure that we can not, lose the momentum that we've got, because sometimes the emails can be flagged and then shut down by the email providers. So this is about obviously making sure that there's this graduation of emails that get sent out, because I know that was something that a few agents had reached out to me about previously. And also I know Chris has had some people reach out to him, because realtors have, say, a database of 500 to 1,000 people, and then they go and just do a blast once a month. That right there is key behavior that can get your email flagged. What do you do when it happens? What can you do to avoid it? We talk about also diversifying the approach from a marketing standpoint as well. It's actually really good technically to understand this so that you don't get yourself in that position, because it becomes a snowball effect once you have one email that's been flagged. Thanks so much. Welcome to Rethink Real Estate. My name is Ben Brady, and this is a real estate podcast aimed to deliver sales strategies, marketing tips, and business insights from industry experts and myself to build a listing-focused business for the future. Let's get into it. Christopher.
Hello, sir.
How you doing?
Good. How about you?
Good. Weather up there. I know that the other day, for the audience listening, Chris calls us and goes, can't do the meeting. Danielle doesn't drive in ice, and I've got to take the kids to school. What the hell is going on up there, mate, in Washington? I mean, Gig Harbor doesn't get ice, does it?
Well, we got snow. We got a bunch of snow recently. I still have snow in my front yard, like just a little bit, but yeah, it's just snow. It's February.
I want you to know I don't have any snow in my front yard, okay?
Yeah,
just so you can.
I mean, you guys are getting the exact opposite problem. You guys are getting giant fires and stuff like that. So.
Well, either way, outside of the weather, I thought that the topic that we would talk about today is something that, it has definitely been something that we've been dealing with from an email perspective within the company at the moment, but it's something that I think that agents are pretty ill prepared for. And I know that we're very conscious of it based on your experience and what you've done in the past and understanding it deeper than most. But it's getting your emails sort of, what do we call them, shut down or designated as spam emails, or what is the actual technical term for an email that you cannot use because it's been flagged?
Yeah, it's just flagged. So like there's a couple things that could happen. You can basically get like soft flagged, which is there's a handful of different ways where your email could start getting marked as spam when you try to send emails to people in your database. And it could either happen on their side, which is from a sense of like, if you're sending it through Gmail or you're sending it through Outlook, those companies can block you, as well as certain domains can block you. So if you're sending it to like an entire company or stuff like that, those companies could then blacklist you, and then you can't reach through past their firewalls and stuff like that. So that's the big thing. So like for our example, like we send a lot of emails to brokerage emails. Yep. So, Sotheby's or Compass or anything like that, we send it to those, and those companies' domains can then say, hey, they're sending a lot of emails to us. This doesn't seem right. And then they can flag us at that point, and we can't get past them to then reach out to the agents that we're trying to get a hold of. So the other way would be that we just basically get flagged by internal systems like Gmail and Outlook and all those other things.
I think that it's important, though, to understand from an agent perspective, though, if we bring it back to the real point of why we're bringing it up, because it's really interesting what I've seen how people manage their database is that there's a lot of people that don't do consistent outreach. So when they do a big email out to their database, they get a bunch of unsubscribes. That's one of the big ticket items, isn't it? Or when it comes to getting marked or flagged as a spam email.
Yeah, if you go from sending, anywhere from 0 to 10 emails a day on your email address, and then all of a sudden trying to send thousands in one day, you're always going to get flagged. Like something's always going to get something's always going to happen at that point. You're going to get a bounce. You're going to get your internal system blocking you. Something's going to happen because it seems out of the norm. Think of it like your credit card. If you're making like one transaction every week, and then all of a sudden there's a $5,000 transaction on there, the credit card company is going to call you up and say, "Hey, what's this?" Like, right. So that's similar to what's happening from an email perspective is that you're just going too hard in such a short time frame, which is why it's always nice to have constant trips going
Yep.
out
Yep.
and different emails at that point. So that when you do try to send a bigger bulk email, that's all the same, you're not hurting your system at that point. But the other thing I would say is have a dedicated domain and email address for those big blasts at that point, and have that constantly being warmed up by companies like Smart Lead or stuff like that, where it's
So that, hang on.
yep,
There's a couple things. There's a couple things in that because I don't want to get to the warm up part of it yet because I think that's a real hack in all of this. But I was going to ask you, do you think it's smart to have an additional email for them? So I have benbrady.com, say, okay, so
yep.
I can have ben@benbrady.com as an email address, and then I can have marketing@benbrady.com, and then I can have offers at benbrady.com. So I could have multiple emails out of the domain that I own. Do you think that it's
Let's
good?
take a step back on that. So I
Okay.
would look at this from two different standpoints.
Yep.
There's ways to get your email flagged, and there's ways to get your domain flagged, and that's the two different variations at that point. So
Okay.
if you're sending out emails from Ben Brady at benbrady.com, and that's your personal email address, that's the one you use every single day for your business. That's the one where all your responses are coming to, everything like that, and you're sending emails from there, and you get that flagged, you're going to have an issue now to just have your day-to-day work life. And so
Right.
that's something you would probably want to separate a little bit. And one way to separate that is by jumping over and having a marketing at benbrady.com. But if you send too much out of there to people who haven't opted into your emails, people who flag you, they mark as spam in their inboxes, they do all the things that hurt your reputation. That could not just tarnish that email inbox, that one marketing at benbrady.com, but it can then start flagging the benbrady.com email address as
Got it.
well, which would then start to shut down your other day-to-day work email at that point. So the difference would be having a completely separate domain. That's the safest. The safest is to have a completely separate domain, whether it's benbrady.info, benbrady.co, even stuff as little as those changes help you. And then you could just forward those over to your domain or your website or stuff like that. And you could have all those replies go straight into your other email inboxes as well. So that would be the safest, is by having a completely separate domain, so that if you burn the email address and you burn the domain, then you're going to still be safe on your day-to-day work email.
Well, then, so then now let's go to the thing that you'd mentioned about warming up. This was something
Yep.
that I wasn't aware of. Obviously, we've had to get many domains in order to make sure that we can continue to use the outreach side of it. Because like I didn't understand how fickle the system was in the sense
Yeah.
of flagging, because it was so interesting, Chris. Like we only really increased the volume slightly, and then all of a sudden, like we started to have problems, and it's kind of like it's kind of like having termites in a house, so to speak. You find them one place and then all of a sudden they're everywhere within the house, or like it's an infestation, so to speak. Because like we had that one problem and then all of a sudden everything else started to, become a problem, so to speak. So I guess that warming things up, what is that and how does that look like and where do they go to do that?
Yeah, so warming up, there's a few things that you need to take into consideration when you're trying to send emails at scale. And so there's a couple of things that are the technical stuff, which is like a DKIM, which is basically an authentication token that you're putting on that domain. And I know this is getting very technical speak, but just have your IT person or something like that set it up the proper way. They'll
What is it called
understand
again? What's it called?
DKIM.
DKIM.
Yeah, it's when you're sending it from like a platform like HubSpot or your database or your CRM and stuff like that. It's basically giving it an extra authentication that this is a real domain. This is real at that point. So what you're doing, that's one technical piece of it. And the second thing is you can't just turn on an email address and a domain and just start blasting emails from it. It's just not. Nobody thinks that's normal. Where you just turn it on all of a sudden, hey, I send 100 emails a day all of a sudden from this brand new email address. Gmails, Outlooks, and all those, they start to flag those internally. And then you're going to have an issue from that standpoint. So what you usually need to do is warm them up. So you start by sending small increments, 1, 2, 5, 10, 15 emails a day, and start ramping up to the goal that you're trying to get to over a multi-week period. So you're trying to get there, usually within 14 days. is that you reach the limit that you want to on that 14th day. But if you're trying to send thousands, I mean, you're looking at, you need to start warming it up over an entire month.
And this is an issue, mate, because
Yeah,
like it's amazing the databases that we see just with realtors. Like they say, oh no, my database is over 1,000 people. Like now we try and get them to bring it down to people that they know who they are and what they do
yep.
as an actual database. But like if you think about it, this must become an issue for a great deal of agents out there because they just go in and just blast an email to over 1,000 people all of a sudden after only sending 10 or 15 a day.
And it's only getting worse, as sad as that is, because of like the Apple privacy protections and people understanding they can say mark as spam and they can say stop and all that stuff. And so little things like that, the email inboxes start to pick up on these trends. The algorithms inside of the email inboxes, they start to pick up on these trends and see how many people are saying stop or unsubscribe or mark as spam and stuff like that. And then they start to flag you, as well as bouncing. And I think that's a big thing that people don't understand too. We use a program called Clearout. And so what that does is we upload lists to that, and we can then have their program find out if their emails are valid, if they're going to bounce, if they're a catch-all email inbox,
So,
stuff like that.
a bounce means you've sent it and it basically goes
It kicks
nowhere.
us back.
What is
Yeah.
a bounce? What is a? I've got a couple of questions that I want to fire at you here. Is that
Yep.
what is a bounce rate first and foremost, and like that you should be conscious or cautious of?
Yep. You want to be way under 1%. So I usually say you want to
Wow,
be under
shit,
like point, yeah, 0.1%
got it.
would be the goal from that standpoint. I think the safe range is 0.1 to
Okay,
0.4%. But yeah, you want to be really low.
right.
So when you start getting in the 1.5s, the 2%, the 3%, that's when you're going to start getting marked as spam pretty inherently, and that domain's going to get flagged. Which is why you want to use these apps like Clearout, where you upload an entire list. You basically verify that list. It'll come back with an export that you can export directly into your CRMs,
Yep.
and basically say if it's safe to send to these people or
That's
not.
something. That's something you should probably be doing on a pretty regular basis, like once a quarter or once every 6 months or something like that. Even with your database of people that you know, just in case things are changing, because the bounce
Exactly.
rate is certainly one. Now, next
It also
question.
helps you from
Yeah.
your database perspective too to understand which emails are bad, and that could be a
Yep.
touch point for you in the future as an agent. Say, hey, I tried to email you and it just didn't work. Can I get your correct email address? Like, give them a phone call at that point, because they might have switched jobs and that could have switched an email address. They might have closed an email account and stuff like that.
Quick question on this one is, you may have mentioned it and I might have just not heard it. Is that what is the company that we use to warm up the emails?
I use SmartLead, so that is smartlead.ai, I think is what it is.
Okay.
There are other ones out there, so just look up email warm up. There are ones that do it manually, and then there's ones that do it from an AI perspective. And we use the one from an AI just from a volume perspective right now.
Yep. And then is there a platform that is more susceptible to this? Meaning Gmail, Outlook. I
Yep.
don't know.
So
Like I don't know.
Gmail's smarter when it comes to flagging it.
Okay.
So they will block your entire account pretty quickly.
Right.
And so they're smarter from that standpoint, but they also have a better send reputation. So if you send from Gmail, in the back end, it's basically showing like this came from Google, and so there's more trust on email providers because it comes from Google and because they've block accounts pretty quickly. They're doing spam tactics, while Outlook, they don't block you as fast, but they'll basically start to ghost your email address. And our goal from any email that we send out, for any agent, would be to land in the primary inbox. Obviously, there's spam
Yeah.
folders, there's social folders now, there's promotions folders, there's all these other folders when it comes to all these inboxes. You want to land in the primary inbox as much as possible because that's where you're going to get your opens, your responses. That's where you're going to get your business from if you're doing a cold email outreach program.
Now there's a couple of other things that I want to sort of double down on. It might be too much detail. Like I know bounce rate is one of the key flags, but then is open rate something that if you're not getting a
Yep.
good open rate, that flags it as well?
It doesn't necessarily. I mean, it does flag it, but it's much harder than a bounce rate. So it's
Right.
like, you want to be sitting around the 30 to 40% open rate any given time. So most real estate agents who are sending their list, everyone that I've seen back in the day, was sitting anywhere between 20 and 30%.
Mm.
So they would be like in that 20 like 22% or 26%. 30% and stuff like that. You really want to find a way to give value in your subject line as well as in your email copy and email body to start getting those open rates over time up over 30%. That would be your ideal goal.
Yeah, yeah, and making the subject lines, something to do with what like specific to them. I think that's
To their
probably a little hard,
listing,
but
yeah,
yeah,
to their home, to
yeah,
their neighborhood, to their whatever that is. So,
yeah, that's right.
the other thing I would say from this standpoint is there's a lot of people who have this like preconceived notion of like spam emails, and they just
Mm,
like are like, I hate these spam emails. I get them all the time. All these salespeople trying to sell me stuff. I almost take a different view. Like I have a buddy who we used to sit in the same office, and anytime he got a spam email, like a sales email, it's not even a spam email. I differentiate the two. There's spam emails which are terrible. Like when it
yeah,
comes to like they're trying to fish your account or they're trying to
yeah.
like steal credit card information. Those are like bad. Like when I say a cold sales email, that's a little bit different. Like people trying to sell me on my email, like that's a little bit different. He would respond to every single one and like just waste people's time, waste salespeople's time. And I was like, I get it, bro, but like I'd much rather have them sales email me than sales call me or sales
Oh, no
door
doubt,
knock me. And
no
if we
doubt.
start blocking more and more email addresses, we're going to get back to the day where people are just going to show up at your office and they're going to knock on your door. Like I think that's where things could head if we start blocking emails from providers and all that stuff. So that's me on my soapbox real quick.
Well, I think that there's a part of this also. I got this from Tim Ferriss. For those that may or may not know the podcast, is that he's a pretty big podcaster. And it was funny. He went down the path of actually doing an adless. I remember he did like a half a season where he didn't have any ads on his podcast, and he asked people to do subscription. Now, obviously, people don't want to do subscription; they would rather listen to the ads and have it as free, is what he found out. But it wasn't so much because of the money. They said that they really liked actually understanding like the volume of different things that he would actually put on his podcast and speak about, because it gave them a bit of insight to everything else that's out there. I have to be honest, like, don't get me wrong, I hate going through my emails and deleting them and all that type of stuff, but I still, like, if there's something that interests me, like at the moment I'm right into cycling. So if there's anything cycling related, I will look at it,
Yeah.
If there's anything that's, real estate related as well, like I get the automated emails that I set myself up on our Real Scout system, and I will look at those, like, because I'm interested in my own marketplace in my own area. So I do enjoy, like, as much as you think they clog your inbox up, the reality is that you still actually stay relatively aware of what's going on and maybe what deals are out there and what sales are on and things along those lines through that subliminally. Even though you think that they are junk, at least it informs you around what's happening in real time.
Yeah, we always used to say back in the day, like 10 years ago when we were talking about real estate emails and stuff like that, the open rates, we didn't really care as much about the open rates and the click rates and all that stuff. Those metrics are great, but just delivering and getting deliverability rates of like being able to show that we are in their inbox working, that was something that we saw proof of, because it would show our name regardless. And so
Yeah.
if you're like, hey, now they're in the market to look for an agent, and all of a sudden like they see our name, once every other week inside their email
That's so
inbox,
true. I didn't think
we
about it that
are
way.
we are
Yeah.
looking at it as like a billboard inside of their thing, whether they open it, read it, care, or anything like
Yeah,
that.
it's like driving past a sign and seeing your name on it. Yeah.
Exactly. But we started to see we started to look at trends, and we started to see when people started asking us to come in and do a listing presentation, we would see that they went from not opening our emails at all to all of a sudden starting to open our emails like in the last
Mm,
couple months, because now all of a sudden it's top of mind. Now all of a sudden it matters to them. We're not going to reach 100% of the people we send an email to with the right information at the right time. We're just not. It's not possible. But if we can reach, 5% at the right time, like with the right information, that's going to help our business tenfold. So
yeah.
I think that's usually the big thing. We just looked at it as like, let's try to get to their primary inbox, and how can we figure that out? And so that we can be top of mind when it actually comes to a transaction.
Now, there's a final question on email before we talk about diversifying your approach. Is that how do you know your email's flagged?
You'll start to see it. Open rates, like deliverability rates, you'll start to see a lot of bounce rates. You'll see a lot of things that'll come back. You'll see pushback when you send emails out. You'll see it in your inbox of like, couldn't be delivered. All those things will start to happen. For programs like Outlook and Gmail, if you are an admin, you will also get notifications at that point
Yeah.
as well if something happens. Whether you're getting flagged or the email account's completely shut down. There's a lot of things from that standpoint. So
It's interesting, isn't doesn't it? As we now segue into a bit of diversity stuff, mate, because I think that there's one thing that we're susceptible as a company. I think that we mentioned on one of the beginning episodes that I think it was almost 80% of our, no, 90, almost 90% of our listings have come from a white label perspective, came from emails, and a few of the others came from social. Now, that being said, is that we are making a play. Like most people think, well, you need to double down on the email thing. No, we're trying to make sure that we double down on some other things to bring in some more diversity of lead generation within the business, so we're not so dependent on one avenue. I'm waiting for the day where email is disrupted, though. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know how it looks. I don't all of those things. But if you think about it, email has been around for quite a long time in the scheme of communication.
Yep.
And it still is the primary communication for me. Like with phone calls, it's changed into text. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like there's way more text, and that's really evolved. And then outside of text, it then goes into WhatsApp and groups and different things along those lines. And then even to that point, it's like FaceTime. So now it's not actually calling people like as a normal cellular phone call. It's doing it on an internet phone call, and even if it's not face to face.
Have you gotten spam FaceTimes yet?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, they're coming. They're
Yeah.
happening. So I'm getting spam FaceTime messages. My neighbor got them too. They're kind of funny. So like the fact that they're just trying to FaceTime you, and who knows what spam like thing they're trying to sell or whatever, but you're getting them now. I think we all thought text message was going to take over both phone calls and email, and I
Yeah.
think it only has taken over. It works from an e-commerce perspective. Text message, it works tremendously instead of emails. Like sending out, text message offers, sales, stuff like that. Like that's been great from a text side. But there's so many more parameters to jump through from a spam protection, from a text side of things. Like
Right.
it's way quicker to get your entire phone number taken down by sending spam text messages, or
Right.
getting not even spam text messages, but again, cold sales texts. Versus where people just mark them as junk. It is way faster to get those phone numbers blocked than it is to get an email address blocked these days. So, like,
Huh.
I mean, if you sent out 200 text messages in the next hour, like, you're probably going to get blocked at some point. Well, if you send
At
out
some
200
point.
emails, you're going to have some leeway at that point.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny though. Like I guess from a diversity perspective as well, Chris. Like the one thing that you were mentioning before is that about TikTok being shut down as well.
Yeah.
Now, again, obviously it hasn't been shut down; it's been extended, but there is definitely some friction when it comes to that. And you think about like I don't necessarily have any sympathy for TikTok in any way, shape, or form from a leadership perspective, whatever. Okay. And I think that if they are stealing data and there is a privacy issue, yeah, we should shut it down. But the thing that I do think about is that if I've doubled down and my business is TikTok, or and TikTok is different to doing Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts, because it's so much longer you can do on TikTok. So therefore, there's a little bit more content in that sense. Like the people that do the Amazon stuff and the influencers and all that stuff, even though, I don't necessarily agree that apparently 60% of kids that are coming out of high school, their number one job pick is not to go to college, it's actually to be an influencer. And it's like, oh, okay, right. That's probably a bit weird. And that's
it's the same thing as like when they wanted to be a YouTuber, remember? Like
yeah,
5 years ago?
true.
Like,
True.
Yeah.
But where I'm going with this is that, there's the social attribute of things. There's the email attribute of things. There's also the mailer side of things that you could do, the more physical element. I still don't agree with that. I think that you do social targeting before you do that, because I don't think it's a good ROI, because you can't track it. However, that diversification, mate, is so important in their business. What do you think about from the email side of stuff? I want to talk a little bit more about diversity of content out there, because in social media, you can do shorts, you can do your shorts and reels, then you can do static posts, then you can run ads, you can do so many different things that there is diversity within the network or within that platform. It's the same with emails. You've got your generic marketing stuff that people have to download to see because it's an image. But then there's also the individual personalized emails that looks like an email that you've actually really sent to someone. Like all of that from a diversity play is that I think you need to have diversity in platforms, but then you've got to have diversity within those platforms even further, so that you're not relying on one or two or three individual strategies.
I think personally, I think the day of marketing emails are pretty much dead.
Right.
So like sending emails where they're all fancy and beautified and they look like a marketing email, those are for the e-commerce world or the Nordstroms of the world and stuff like that. Like them, Saks and all them, like being able to display their products beautifully that matches their brand. That's for them at this point. I think if you're trying to get information out, literally just text body copy with a couple links in there, getting people over to a website that's beautiful at that point. I think that's probably your primary focus, just because those marketing emails, one, they get you flagged easier from a lot of things, from the images and from the way they're formatted and all that stuff. Plus, people just don't consume that content anymore in that shape and way. Most people are looking at it on their phone. They just want the information very quickly. They want a text message in their email inbox. Like that's just
Yeah.
how we've seen. We started, I mean, when we first started sending emails, they were a little bit marketing. Like they were very marketing and they had
Yeah.
images and
Yeah.
stuff like that. Now we've cut back on all of them. And almost our number one, still to this day, email parameter that we sent out, email style template was just a CEO email that we came
Yeah.
from you and said, hey, would love to talk to you, blah, blah, blah. Look personal, all that stuff. That's the way of pretty much every B2B or B2C type of business right now, where it's you're providing a service. I would say when you're providing a service, it should look like you are one-on-one reaching out to someone versus trying to be beautiful and have a newsletter and all that stuff. You could still have newsletter topics, but put them almost in a text format and see how they
Yeah.
perform that way. Like talk
You're
about it in
almost
one-on-one email.
you're almost better off doing a long format video and having it chopped up into shorts and doing a newsletter that way, visually or
Yeah.
verbally. And then also Tony Self on Tech Tony. I think that episode comes out actually after Chris, so make sure you jump onto it. He talks about those faceless videos that you can do where you jump onto. He talks about the platform. Can't remember what it's called at the moment, but basically you type out the script, you can train it for your voice, and then
Yep.
it puts up images around, like he did Palos Verdes, for example, and because that's where they are, and it spoke about Palos Verdes and the history of Palos Verdes and a few events that are happening. So I think
That's
that
actually the
there's
number one way that people are making money on like TikTok is they just upload they upload it to like 11 Labs. I don't know which one he mentioned, but you could upload.
He said 11 Labs was the gold standard, but he said this is
There's
another
probably
one that
another
does
one.
the
Yeah.
imagery as well. Yeah.
Exactly. So you could upload a script into 11 Labs. They'll speak it and then they just overlay that over a video, and that's how people make money on TikTok. It's the similar thought process of just upload an entire newsletter and then just put it on a video at that point so that you can reach people on social, and then your emails that you send to them are more value driven or linking over to that. Like hey, you want more information on this? I shot a whole video over here that you could kind of jump into, or I have an entire blog post on my website. Whatever your medium is of trying to get them over to something that's more long format, don't put that in the email, in my opinion. Like I just
Yeah.
don't think it needs to be there anymore. And I think that's also a way of diversifying the way that you are grabbing attention at that point. Because if you're solely reliant on email and then your email account gets shut down, or you're solely reliant on TikTok and your TikTok gets shut down, you're going to have troubles. You're just going to have troubles with your business, and you're going to have to jump through all these other hoops to try and gain that followership back in other ways. And so that's where I would try to make sure that you are reaching on different platforms in different ways. And I think that's where your website becomes the easiest gateway to not get shut down, is a place where you have less hoops and less other people controlling your business. Whether it's other social media providers or other email platforms or anything like that. Like face to face, this would be the number one way to do business, but it's just not the reality of today's world. And so I think that's where you just need to create less friction or less places where things get shut down between you and your client.
Well, folks, I think that this episode is relevant based on the fact that maybe it is already happening to you. You don't know how to solve it. And maybe it's something that you just need to be conscious about before you go blasting things out. Christopher, as always, thank you for the insights.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
So about 75% of our audience hasn't liked, followed, or subscribed to our podcast. It would mean the world to us, and it would help this podcast more than you know to expand our reach if you were to like, follow, or subscribe on any of the platforms that you're watching or listening on. Thanks again.